Chapter 6. Chess Game. Numer touched her shoulder. "What's the matter?" She looked up at him. "It's Goldstreak. It talked." "But they don't talk, do they?" he asked. "My impression was that they only communicate what is said to them, or near them." Goldstreak stretched a bit more and said, "Now talk." It was louder this time, enough so that everyone heard. "I go. Talk to Darkings. Teach them." It returned to its huddle with Leaf and Jelly. They vibrated together until Goldstreak's head rose out of the mass. "Freedom," it said, clearly. "Choosing." "Do you know where your brethren are? Who they spy on?" asked the Badger. All three blots nodded. "And I can transport a Darking from place to place, here or in the mortal realms," the Badger commented. He sighed and pointed out, "It will take us a while, even going from spy to spy by magical means. Transporting all over the mortal realms, I will need to rest. Numer Salamin, look after my kit. Put that back on your neck," he ordered Dane crossly, meaning his claw. She obeyed. Goldstreak ended a last conference with Leaf and Jelly, and rolled up the Badger's leg to his back. The god looked at it. "Ready?" he asked. Goldstreak nodded. Silver light exploded, and they were gone. Numer straightened their camp. He filled their fire pit and the trench that had served as a privy, scattering leaves and stones to make the place seem untouched. Dane packed, rapidly stowing their belongings. Broadfoot, Leaf, and Jelly all watched from a safe distance. "It's as good as the courtship dance of cranes," the Duckmole remarked. When they finished, he created a pouch in Numer's fresh shirt and materialized in it. "You never bump into each other, and you never try to do the same tasks." Dane smiled up at her tall friend. "We've been doing this for a while," she explained. "I've lost count of the camps we've put up and broken down." Numer reached as if he wanted to stroke her cheek, then dropped his hand. "Where did the Darkings ride?" Leaf coiled around Dane's neck. Jelly, still a quiver, tucked itself into a pocket of the girl's breeches, letting only its makeshift head stick out. Today, Dane set the pace. She knew exactly how fast she and Numer could walk together, just as she knew how often they had to rest. The man and Broadfoot talked quietly. Numer had a great many questions about the home of the Duckmole's mortal children. Dane and the Darkings watched their surroundings. The small blots were fascinated. Wary, the girl carried her bow in her free hand. She wanted no surprises. Their trail led downhill, through a less heavily forested land. It was almost noon when they came to the narrow arm of a swamp. "Mahler's Swamp?" asked Dane, seeing that Numer was looking at their map. The mage nodded. "There should be a bridge ahead." Dane pointed. The bridge was a low one, rising a handful of inches over the water's surface. Fashioned of sturdy-looking logs, it would hold them clear of the murky water until they were completely across. Mosquitoes and biting flies came for them as soon as they stepped onto the bridge. Killing the insects did no good. They were gods, and restored themselves instantly. Their dead bodies fell into the mouths of waiting frogs and fish. Their bites raised welts that itched crazily. At last, Numer spun a fiery magical shield to keep the things at bay. The insects buzzed outside, on a level with the humans' faces. "The bears and the deer let us feed off them," protested a horsefly. "Muskrats," a tiny voice said. Dane couldn't see who spoke. "Don't forget them." "They are gods," Numer replied calmly, undisturbed by a chat with insects. "No doubt they replace their blood instantly. We are not gods." "Mortal blood tastes best," added the small voice. "It has life in it. The blood of gods doesn't." "I can't begin to tell you how sorry I am to deny you such a treat," Numer said. "You know very well we could break that shield if we wanted to," cried a black fly. "We are gods, after all." "What good is blood that's given so grudgingly?" the horsefly grumbled. "What good indeed?" inquired the mage. Voice mild. "Selfish!" a mosquito snapped. "I hope the Mahler eats you. It would serve you right," the invisible bug told them. The insects left as abruptly as they had come. Dane wiped her forehead on her sleeve. It was hot and close in this marsh. "Broadfoot, what is this Mahler?" Numer asked. He kept his staff, its crystal charged with his gift, raised before him in case something larger than insects came to feed. He looked like a crocodile in the image that Warren showed us." "Lord Mahler is an older god of the people," said the duck mole. "He is the link between crocodiles and the dinosaurs. May we move faster?" "Why?" asked Numer. Dane paused briefly to string her bow. When she reached back to her quiver, an arrow met her fingers. Leaf had gotten it for her. "Mahler isn't entirely friendly to trespassers," Broadfoot told him. "He puts up with them on his good days, of course." "You're afraid today may not be one of his good ones?" suggested the mage. "Exactly." Dane watched their surroundings closely as they followed the low bridge around the bole of an immense cypress. Below, in murky water, she saw an oddly regular pattern that ran under their bridge to emerge on the other side. The pattern moved. Water heaved and rolled. A hollow tree boomed like a giant drum. The bridge shook, then settled. The thing underneath headed for open water, pulling strings of vines in its wake. Dane's jaw dropped. At best guess, the creature was over 30 feet in length. Any 3 of the crocodiles she'd seen in Carthage, lined up head to tail, could fit inside its skin comfortably. It curved back around, then stopped. Twin yellow rounds popped through the surface. A tiny voice just under the girl's ear, Leaf, said, "Uh-oh." Dark shudders slid down over the orbs, then lifted. They were eyes. Dane gulped, sweating. It was one thing to see a creature in a vision over her father's map. Such a vision was very misleading as to size. One of those eyes alone was larger than Broadfoot. If she used her bow, would her arrows do more than tickle him? "What the—" Numer stared at those 2 immense yellow eyes. "Lord Mahler," Broadfoot whispered. "Greetings to you, cousin," he called. "And good day," muttered Numer. He broke into a trot, Dane behind him. To their relief, solid land was a few yards ahead. Mahler thrashed as they stepped off the bridge. The surface of the swamp rolled and crested and splashed the travelers. The great creature dove, leaving only surging water to mark his passage. Broadfoot shook a clump of plants off his bill. "I don't know which is worse, when he's cross or when he's trying to be funny." Numer wiped his face on his sleeve. "If it's all the same, I won't stay around to study his moods." Now the way led slowly uphill. The trees thinned. Clearings expanded. Streams flattened and slowed. The air warmed and dried. They kept going after sunset, using the lights overhead, fired by the war with chaos, to see by. At last they made camp beside a lazy, wide stream. After eating, Broadfoot volunteered to stand watch until dawn, since he didn't always need to sleep. The 2 humans curled up under their blankets. Dane had thought she would sleep instantly. Instead, she watched the war lights bloom and fade. "I know my da," she thought. "I could change my name. No more looks from them that know I'm a sorosry because Ma was my only family, that I'm a bastard. I suppose Da acknowledges me now. It's my right to change my name. Wierenstra. Verla Dane Wierenstra." It didn't sound right. When all was said and done, she was Verla Dane's sorosry, really. She'd been that for 16 years. Changing now would be uncomfortable. That settled, she closed her eyes. What did the Dream King want to say tonight? She had the answer almost instantly. Rattail appeared next to her. They were seated on clear air that had turned solid, enough so that Dane could hear her friend's tail slapping the invisible floor in back of her. "So now we get down to it," said the wolf. "There is one thing that Father Universe and Mother Flame have forbidden Oase to do: meddle in the affairs of mortals. All of chaos gets half of its strength from mortal creatures, because they are half chaos by nature. My Lord Ganiel thinks that someone is helping Oase to tap into the other half of mortal fire, the half that does not belong to her. He thinks that she is playing this game, which she is forbidden to do." Below them appeared a great chessboard in red and gold. Oase was the Red Queen, her appearance for the most part that of a woman in an orange gown with tangled black hair. Only her eyes and hands changed shape constantly. Her king was an empty shadow that tried to draw all that was nearby into it. At last, a pincer-handed Oase ringed it with multicolored fire to save her other pieces from being gulped by her consort. The leftmost rook was a yammering 3-headed ape. "Discord," said Rattail when the girl pointed it out and asked. Uwase's other rook was a lean, blue-skinned youth with 6 arms, each one holding a weapon. Smiling at Dane, he pulled a 7th arm from behind his back. It held Numar's dripping head. A hand rested on her shoulder. She jumped. The newcomer was Numar, well and whole. "Violence," he said, pointing to the blue youth, "with Discord, the gatekeeper of chaos." Dane glanced at the rook Discord and saw that it juggled her own head. "Charming," she murmured dryly. "It's their nature," said Rattail with an unwolf-like shrug. "They can't help being what they are." Numar took his hand from Dane's shoulder and looked at the wolf. "Dane, would you introduce us?" "I don't know," said the girl, looking at Rattail. "Are you Rattail, or are you the Dream King?" The wolf's shape puddled, curved, and straightened into a rail-thin man with inky, tousled hair and bottomless eyes. "I thought perhaps you would be less unnerved by hearing of these things from a friend." "Maybe," she replied, looking at Gold's ranking pieces. These were the great gods, Mithros and the goddesses king and queen, the black god and a wide-eyed female. "Shaketh, goddess of seers," whispered Numar, "as high priests, the desert god Jehuk and the smith god as knights, Kadunka the world snake and the wave walker as rooks." "Where are you?" Dane asked Ganiel. The Dream King smiled. "Like you mortals, I have one foot in the divine realms, the other in chaos. Lately, that's been a most uncomfortable position." "Understandably," replied Numar. He pointed to Uwase's pawns as they materialized on the board all at once. "Now we have some answers." The central pawn was a Stormwing Ozorn. His closest neighbor was a blonde Scanran mage who used a ruby in place of a lost eye. Numar whistled softly. "An Arhedensra. That explains far more than it doesn't." "He is very powerful?" asked Dane. "Yes, indeed. And he serves only the Council of 10 in Scanra, not whomever they have as king that week. The Copper Islander to his right? That's Valmer, the 3rd of King Orin's sons, carrying a general's baton. And next to him is Danao, the High Admiral of the Copper Isles, and Valmer's brother. Ozorn has powerful allies." Dane wasn't sure how mere two-leggers might compete with the Spitterin, a giant furred spider with a human head, Hurok, dull-eyed female Stormwing, and winged ape that filled out the number of red pawns, but she kept that to herself. Looking to the row of gold pawns, she saw a piece that looked like her at the far end of the board, and one like Numar at the end closest to them. Between their pieces stood a gold-skinned, almond-eyed Yamani who carried a spyglass, Taka, King Jonathan, Queen Theet, the King's Champion, and Kitten. "I don't like being so far apart from you," she told Numar. Pieces vanished and reappeared. Now the great gods struggled with the chaos beings, neither side appearing to have the advantage. Ozorn and his allies, holding swords, spears, and axes that rippled with the constantly changing colors that filled the sky and chaos vents in the divine realms, attacked the gold pawns. Gold's pieces were armed, but the attack took them while they were staring at the great gods fight. Red's pieces swiftly cut them down. When Dane, Numar, and the other gold pawns were dead, Ozorn and his allies slumped to the board and dissolved, blending with their weapons. Their melted selves flowed around the outside of the ring of struggling gods to become the chaos stuff from Dane's earlier dreams, flooding over, then eating the great gods. "I don't like that game," said Numar, his grin a bit forced. "Can we play a new one?" In the blink of an eye, the whole board twisted. When it straightened, all the pieces had been returned to their original places. This time, as the gods and the lords of chaos struggled, Gold's pawns led the attack. The Scanran mage threw fire at them. King Jonathan blocked it. Alana the champion locked blades with an armed Spidrin. Dane's pawn went straight for Ozorn, Numar's for the Copper Islander Danao. All over the board, opponents were locked in desperate battles. The Spidrin was the first killed. Alana raised her sword with a triumphant cry. Uwase appeared, shrieking as she charged the king's champion. Gold's pawns were swept out of harm's way as the great gods appeared in a circle around the Queen of Chaos. Red's pawns vanished. "If she is behind this, she will come to avenge her servitor, the one who found a way for her to use mortal power without Father Universe and Mother Flame knowing. Once she reveals herself, they will enter the matter and end the fight. Gods and mortals will be safe again. at least for another 1,000 years. Ganiel, who had stayed beside the girl and Numer all along, looked at them. Dane could no more read the emotion in those shadow eyes now than she had been able to the last time she met their gaze. He disappeared and was replaced by tree limbs and leaves. It took Dane a moment to realize that she was now awake and that Ganiel's soft voice was in her mind, not her ears. Her ally may not be a Spidrin. It may be another immortal, or a human. Whoever it is, for the sake of your parents, humankind, and the beast people, you must kill him or her. It is the only way to end the war. Why didn't someone just tell us what the problem was? Demanded Numer. Dane looked. He, too, was awake and sitting up. Because the great gods believe that no problem exists. They say that no mortal would risk the destruction of his or her own realm by helping Oase to break the walls that keep her contained. I no longer argue with my brothers and sisters. They only laughed, so I gave it up. Farewell then, mortals. Good luck. Though he was nowhere to be seen, Dane knew the Dream King had left as surely as if she'd seen him walk away. Later in their travels that day, as they ate lunch by a stream, the ground shook. Two sounds tore through the air. The first, Dane and Numer agreed later, was that of an iron door being slammed. The other, hard on the heels of the first, was undeniably that of a drawbridge being slowly, ponderously lowered. Dane and Numer covered their ears to no effect. When the booming echoes faded, she checked Leaf and Jelly. Both were shrinking, shivering blobs. Oh my goodness, Broadfoot remarked sadly. So it's come to that. Come to what? Dane asked, rubbing her abused ears. Follow me. Broadfoot waddled over to the stream, Dane, Numer, and the Darkings right behind him. Leaning over the water, he breathed on it. An image, or rather 3 images, grew on the surface. The first, before Numer, showed the walls and ramparts of Port Leggan from high overhead. A colossal spotted hyena gnawed on a tower, then on a siege engine outside the walls. Under her, around her, even through her, humans surged in battle. Was the hyena a ghost? Raising a muzzle that dripped blood, she gave the stuttering, eerie cry that made her kind so feared. Pricking cat ears forward, Dane also heard a distant, dim roar. Human voices shouting in the clang of swords, shields, and armor. In the water before the duck mole, Dane saw wheat fields. Cattle and sheep grazed nearby, herded by children and dogs. Over everything, in a form as sheer as the hyena's, slunk a yellow, mangy cur dog. He was little more than a skin-covered skeleton, as unhealthy an animal as Dane has ever seen. He took bites from everything, grapes, wheat, apples, herd animals. As he bit, things began to shrivel. Dane looked at the water image in front of her and shivered. It showed Chorus, the Tortlan capital, with its crowds, rich marketplaces, and temples. A giant ghostly rat crept through the streets, thrusting his nose into windows and doorways. He looked at a man who was making a speech in front of the stocks. The man began to cough. A woman brought him a dipper of water. He could barely drink it. 2 men helped him to sit. The ghosts of tiny rats flowed from his mouth, landing on those who had gathered around him. Slaughter has been out since May, Broadfoot said. Malady, though, and starvation. What you heard were the gates to their dwellings being opened. The 3 sorrows, whispered Numer, making the sign against evil on his chest. Dane copied him in the sign. Her skin prickled. Leaf curled around her neck to see. Now it rubbed its tiny head with its green hat against her cheek. Jelly had vanished into Dane's pocket when the 3 images had appeared in the water. They are the siblings of the gods, the duckball explained. Their appearance causes great changes, many for the good. I doubt the ones they kill think so, murmured Dane. She looked at the duck mole, thinking hard. It was one thing to ask the badger for help, another to ask the duck mole. Broadfoot had nothing to do with her, really, or with humankind. There were no 2-leggers in the lands where his mortal children live. You know, said the mage casually, the more disorder that is created in the mortal realms, the more power that Oase will have to use. Or so it appears to me. Dane took her cue from the man. I bet the chaos will feed on this. How can she not, when all 3 sorrows are wandering loose? The duck mole sighed. So that's it. You want me to halt the sorrows. He scratched himself. I can't stop them all, he warned them. They are strong. They ought to be, with humans feeding them for centuries. I can only hold one, and I'll have to remain in the mortal realms to keep it from breaking loose. The great gods themselves could do no better. Some powers cannot be ruled, even by the mightiest. Dane and Numer traded worried looks. Choose between slaughter, malady, and starvation? Who are we to say which one was free? Whispered the girl. If we ask to hold slaughter, malady and starvation will kill hordes of folk. But if we hold starvation, which kills slow, the other two will wipe out large numbers. Her throat closed. Armed humans can defend themselves, Numer said, thinking aloud. Hopefully starvation can be held at bay through food imports. But malady, he shuddered. Malady doesn't care who it takes or how many. Malady can wipe out armies and leave no one in the Yemeni Isles or Karthik to farm the land. And it's just out, added the duck-mole. It's weak still. Dane shivered and tried not to think of friends killed in battle or dying slowly of hunger. Malady, she whispered. If it can be only one, let it be that. Broadfoot rocked from side to side, muttering. At last he stopped. Stay on the path, he ordered. It is a fixed thing, even on the Sea of Sand. It will lead you to the Dragonlands. Getting in, of course, is your affair. Of course, murmured Numer. Dane knelt to face him. I'll owe you for this, Broadfoot. So will I, added the man. It is only fair. If you can force Owasse to reveal herself and save the divine and mortal realms, we ought to do some things for you. Be careful, then. Silverfire gathered round his small body, and he vanished. What will we do if the dragons refuse? Dane asked Numer. Fret about them later, he said, gathering their things as she quickly finished her lunch. I'm worried about crossing the Sea of Sand, if Rakash doesn't help us. Dane stowed her pack and quiver on her back. What's wrong with the Sea of Sand? I keep forgetting that we haven't both made a study of myths and legends, remarked Numer, shrugging into his own pack. The Sea of Sand is more than a desert. It's said the great gods take mortal heroes there, though Alana the Champion never mentioned such an experience. If the hero survives, it is a sign that his, or her, mortal impurities have been seared away. Dane winced. Please, goddess, she said, looking up. Send Rakash with help. She led the way to the path. I'm fair confused, she told Numer. If I'm in the divine realms, why do I look up to pray to the gods? Shouldn't I be looking somewhere else? Thinking about things like that will give us both headaches, he replied. Although I believe that Shuliar Shimon had visions of the dead praying by looking down. Now, in the lost books of Ekaladam... Dane smiled. As long as he could talk of learning, Numer would forget anything else, including future dangers. At her belt and on her shoulder, two heads craned toward the mage. The Darkings were fascinated. The path ahead climbed. They stopped often both to rest and to get out of the sun. To the east, the ground fell to a broad river with a sea of grass on its far bank. To the west, the thinning forest gave way bit by bit to scrub and short grasses. Finally, as the afternoon sun beat down without mercy, they stopped near a spring tucked into a rocky cleft. First they ate a meal of bread and fruit, then curled up to sleep until the sun went down. What do you mean, no reports? The voice was young, male, with the accent of the Copper Isles. All through this campaign, you have been able to say exactly where the enemy is. Now, suddenly, you have no information from your spies? There is a Yemeni fleet north of us. What if it is coming here? I have but 2 spies there, as you know. If there is some way that they have been detected, put your own idle mages to the task. Osborne's voice was twisted by fury. You want everything handed you as a gift. But for me, you would have neither courage nor allies to take on Tortle, for all your vows of death to King Jonathan's line. If you want news, scry for it. A hoarse voice added, General Valmer, if you think perhaps to take your fleet and slip away tonight, or tomorrow, or ever, know this. From a childhood spent too close to that harsh land for comfort, Dane recognized the Scanran voice. Every skin of liquid fire that you possess will burn should I touch it with my gift. If you throw them overboard, our allies among the merfolk will fashion those skins to your hulls, and I will burn them then. We will not have the Copper Islanders act as they have so often, and forget their vows of allegiance." Footsteps, hurried ones, receded. Dane heard metal claws digging into wood. "The centaurs too grow restless," the Scanran remarked. "I have hairs from every tail among them to bind them to me. They'll sing a very different tune should I scorch even one." Osborne's voice was sullen. "Sometime you must tell me how you first had information so detailed that one might think you perched on the shoulders of the northern defenders, and now you have nothing. I look forward to hearing." Dane opened her eyes and smiled. The Badger and Goldstreak had visited the Darkings in northern Tortland and talked them into breaking contact with their creator. Wanting Numer to sleep a bit more, she wandered over to the spring. On its glittering surface she looked for news of home. An image formed immediately. In it, Broadfoot clung to one of Melody's feet. The rat sorrow tried to shake him off. The duck mole jammed venomous spurs into Melody's transparent flesh. Melody stiffened. His reddened eyes went blank. He froze. Dane blinked. Now she was over Port Leggan, so high that men and the ships that blockaded the harbor looked like toys. In the distance to the southwest, the direction of the Copper Isles, she saw the bright flare of torches. The image moved closer and brightened, so that even though it was night, she saw the shapes of 10 ships. With the strange clear sight granted by the water image, she easily read the flags that crowned the masts. Numer asked softly, "Dane?" He was sitting up, frowning. She began to stuff things into her pack. "The Copper Isles is sending 10 ships. They're flying battle flags, north. I think they're making for Leggan." The sun had set. Quickly they packed before they set out. Jelly changed his seat from Dane's pocket to Numer's shoulder. The land was changing, turning to desert in the west. The path headed that way, gleaming silver under warlight in the light of the newly risen moon, sloping down through huge clusters of rock. In the distance, a bird leaped from a pinnacle, flying as if it meant to reach the moon. When it pulled in its wings and tail, Dane grabbed Numer's arm and pointed. The bird opened itself, spinning on its tail. Lances of silver, blue, and gold light shot from its feathers, an explosion of color over the desert. Within seconds, more dark forms took wing. Each opened itself to the light in a shimmering dance of colors. Unlike the sunbirds, these did not drop back to earth. They spiraled around one another, winding like a river across the scrublands, more of their kind falling in behind them. "Beautiful," whispered Leaf beside Dane's ear. She had been holding her breath. Realizing it, she sighed. "Beautiful," she agreed, stealing a look at Numer. Petting Jelly with a finger, he watched the spectacle, eyes glowing with awe. "I wish I could stay, or come back," he whispered. "So many wonders." The way grew steep. Lizards that glowed pale blue or yellow darted across the path, or crouched in stone hollows, tongues flicking out to taste the air as the two mortals went by. The path led among stone formations that looked like cracked and broken pillars tightly jammed together. Wind and grit had cut the soft rock into laddered, fantastic shapes. They made Dane nervous. She had an odd feeling that some hollows in the columns were eyes that tracked her. She tried to meet one pillar's gaze. Half hypnotized by it, she searched for the flash of intelligence that she knew was there. Numer and Jelly, far up the trail before they realized she wasn't behind them, returned for her. "I feel it too," the man said quietly, drawing her away from the stone. "I don't know if this place is dangerous, but I will be happy to get out of here all the same." For the next 2 miles, the path followed a narrow slot between deep rock cliffs. Numer's crystal blazed with light, creating shadows within shadows, turning long hollows into mouths that screamed. The sense of eyes on her was almost unbearable. The hairs at the nape of her neck stood on end. "Can you put the staff out?" she asked. I think it makes things worse." He nodded. The crystal went dark. She took the lead, making bat ears and cat eyes for herself. Numer saw well in the dark. He also had the moon and the rippling battle flares to light the path. A fresh breeze hit their faces, air from an open place being funneled into a narrow one. Looking up, Dane could see the edges of rock formations. It was nearly dawn. Just ahead, a stone pedestal rose into the air. On top of it, a massive boulder had been cut by the elements into the shape of a question mark. "Well, that's fitting," Numa remarked. Dane grinned, her mood lightening. Behind the question rock lay open air and, she hoped, an end to those frozen screams. To their right, at the edge of a cliff, lay a drop. To their left, stone heights reared. They were on the side of a mountain. Sage clung to the pale soil of the shelf. Junipers thrust twisted limbs into the sky from rock clefts above their heads. Across the path, in a swath too wide for them to jump, a chaos vent had overflowed, its shifting yellow, green, and gray liquid a yard from the cliff's edge. To get around it and back onto the path, they would have to walk that narrow strip of bare earth between rim and air, then pass a massive clump of odd gray stones. "Now that's curious." Numa frowned. "The indigenous stone is the lava rock of the brown variety. These are different. They could be granite." He walked closer, eyebrows knit, halting a few yards from the spill. Dane strung her bow and put an arrow to the string, then trailed him. What?" "Indigenous," he replied quietly. "Local." "Why you couldn't just say local?" He chuckled as the black sparkling fire of his gift flowed out of his hand to wind around the gray rocks. "I'm sorry. I'd meant to do better than my university friends, and not upset people by talking in that abstruse fashion. Then my father complained. He asked how did he know that I even went to those expensive teachers when I spoke as I always had." Dane grinned. "You never told me that. I suppose once you get used to doing it at home, you forget the rest of the time." His magical gift returned to him. "Those rocks seem all right." Impulsively, she cast her magic over the stones. A chasm tore through her magical self, just as it had done with the Skinners. At the edges of her perceptions, the world shifted and rolled. She was drowned in odors and sounds like nothing that could, or should, exist in the natural world. She tried to cry out, but dripping hands closed her mouth. A sharp pain lanced through her ear. The magical assault ended. It was her own hands that had closed her mouth. Tears ran down her cheeks. "What happened?" Numa had one arm around her as he fumbled for his handkerchief. She took it with gratitude. "You're white. They're touched with chaos, those stones," she replied, wiping her eyes. "If I try to use my wild magic to look at something like that, it pulls me in." "You shouldn't generalize from one experience." "But it wasn't just one. This made me remember the last time." She finished wiping her face, particularly her mouth, where she'd felt oozing fingers, and told him what had taken place with the Skinners. "Then how did you break free this time?" Numa demanded. "Leaf, you bit me, didn't you?" she asked, raising a hand to her right ear. Tiny spots of blood came off on her fingers. "Sorry," the leaf-wearing blot replied, hanging its head. "Don't apologize," she told it. "Do that whenever you think it's needful. You just saved me from maybe walking off a cliff." The Darking rubbed its head on her finger. "For now, we shall delay the question of where it got teeth," Numa remarked. "Let's get away from here. Can you walk by those rocks, Dane?" "Chaos mostly gets me through my magic. I just won't use it. And it's not like they're alive, after all." She looked at the way around the chaos vent and rocks, and gulped. 3 feet was a small margin between her and the long drop. "You go. I'll come after." Resettling his pack, Numa took the lead as confidently as if he had 10 yards, not 1, in which to move. Once he cleared the vent's spill, before he passed out of sight behind the rocks, Dane followed. Watching her feet, she skirted the vent, backing away an inch or two as the shifting colored substance threw a tentacle in her direction. Numa cried out. She looked up. A gray stone arm was wrapped around him, lifting him off his feet. Rocky, grinding sounds filled the air as the other stones began to move. Fumbling to get her bow up, Dane stepped back to get a cleaner shot. The rim of the canyon broke under her weight. With a shriek, she dropped, bow tumbling out of her grip.